Hi, I'm Leah Komaiko. I'm a brand strategist to some of the largest brands in the country. I'm also a best-selling children's book author. Today on the show, we're going to talk about how the first book that you can ever remember being read to you may have implanted in you the true story, the authentic version of who you are today, your brand strategy, your best powers, and how to carry that forward. We're also going to talk about a simple strategy that I learned from children, how to do that will keep you going now and ongoingly as you wish. It's very profound. And finally, we're going to talk about the courage to be simple in a really complex world.
Welcome back to our delicious conversation, part 2 of our delicious conversation with Leah Komaiko. Now, Leah is a fascinating human being. She is the author of 20 children's books. But here's the thing. She is massively successful as a branding person. Now, honestly, I got to tell you that I get approached all the time. You probably know this. By people who want to be a guest on the show. We get a lot of requests. And a lot of the time, it's just not a fit. And oftentimes when somebody says, I'm an expert in branding, I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's going to be difficult for you to get on the show because it seems like it's much of a muchness. Leah Komaiko's way of approaching branding is so dramatically different because it's not about slapping something on you and then selling that to the world. It really is eliciting something from you that got lost. And that's what we talked a lot about in part 1 of the show. It was really about how stories saved her in her own life. She's gone on, as I said, to do all these children's books, but she talks about how there are so many children who need saving, who are full-blown adults, who are business executives. And her strategy for bringing that out in them is really quite disarming. And, it's not aggressive in any way. It's so gentle and so loving that I'm kind of deeply inspired by it. I got to tell you, there's not a lot of people in branding who can actually inspire me. Leah is definitely one of those. And by the way, you know me, no bullshit there. That's absolutely true. Love having conversations with her. Love the first part of the show. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the first part, go back. You will find it fascinating, honestly. I want to come back into part 2 of the show here. And I want to talk about, Leah spoke about in the first part, being on a plane, sitting next to this executive who had been, who's a vet and yet was an executive. And in a couple of questions that wants to transform the brand of his organization. Fascinating stuff. So now let's take it to you. Let's talk about how do we integrate this idea? So somebody's listening and going, wow, that's fascinating. How do I do this with myself? And how do I do this with my team? Even if I'm not a CEO, even if I'm just managing 3 or 4 or 5 people.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking for a second.
Sure.
Which is something that always seems like taboo. Don't think, just talk. I got to think for a second. You've said so many incredible things here that have helped me to understand so much. But I think the way you can try this for yourself is ask yourself this question. Can you remember the first book that was ever read to you as a child? Not your favorite book. Can you remember the first book? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. A lot of people can't, and at first, they think. But you want to think in terms of who read to me? Let me ask yourself that question first. Did anybody ever read to me? Do I read to my children now, or children that I know now? But did anybody ever read to me? And then you try and visualize, okay, and I remember my mother read to me, my father read to me, and I just having these conversations with people, they get very deeply into, and people remember, we start talking, suddenly they can remember what kind of pajamas they used to wear when they put on the thing, the whole thing, go back. But ask yourself that question, and then ask yourself Um, you know, start with this, assuming that in business now, what everybody seems to be saying is that nothing works the way that it used to work.
No.
Nothing's working. So what have you got to lose by allowing yourself to go back a few years, not in the memory of your business and what went wrong, but just in the memory of your psyche and what's been hanging out there the whole time, just waiting for you to come back.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's how I would start, would be to just see if you can remember. You can work with, I find when I work with one person first, like the leader of a company or somebody who's starting a company or a couple of really wonderful authors, when I talk to the person who's in charge first, that can make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They land up showing up where they become a better leader. They become a better creative person. They become the real selves. If we're looking for a word called authenticity, which I never really understand what that means a lot when people are talking.
Well, yeah, I'm with you. This is an authentic remote.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
but I mean,
anything.
It's hard. It's really hard to get to, like you, I've spent a lot of years questioning, looking, did all those kind of things, so that I ask myself the kind of questions that maybe regular people don't ask themselves. But if you think about what's going on with your company and how you want to, with yourself, with your company, how you're trying to figure out not only just when I hear people say, I want to bring out the best of my employees, it makes me want to weep, because of course that's what you want to do.
Of course.
But you got to start what starts at the top.
Right.
So I will work with a leader first and get them. A lot of times people are just like, I don't want anything to do with you. And sometimes they don't even have to go through that exercise. They say, I don't even care about that. Just start talking to me, because I have a way of listening to people that I ask questions that other people don't ask. Mm-hmm. So, and they get different kinds of solutions. But give yourself a chance to be small. I think most people in business, myself included, are just terrified of being simple. It's like an insult, supposedly, but it's where all the power is. So give yourself just a chance. You don't have to show up at work with, your teddy bear or anything like that. This is not a John Bradshaw group. It's just think in terms of that. And then how you can work it with your team. Well, let me think about people who have worked it with their team. As the leader, you go back into the group and you start seeing things differently. And you start looking at people differently. This is what I've heard. Yeah. I went through this process with you, and I'm looking at my team, and I can't help but think, I'm in a room with 6-year-olds, and I'm treating them like they're 50. Yeah. And things start to kind of naturally shift. I've had people tell me, not only with I went into a company where I worked with 70 people at one time, which will never happen again. It's too much of a wipeout. I don't know each of their stories and that. But the point is, I watched what happened in that room. And I watched how each person got to go around and talk about their book. And I worked with them and showed them things, and how people were like, it was almost like recommitting themselves to their jobs once they reunited with who they were.
Yes.
Strategies and techniques and all that stuff are really important and valuable. But I think my great pain and push and struggle in my career has been just a real, feel great connection with people. I just don't understand why we've made it so hard on ourselves.
Well, we have. I mean, as you said, because we're trying to be professional and we're trying to sound smart, and God forbid we should sound anything less than smart, and all those things. We've all got some kind of inferiority or some kind of imposter syndrome running around inside of our coconuts, and we're trying to get beyond that. But the thing that, for me, that I find interesting is first of all, I love the way you framed it, which is when we're digging into this, it's not just the story. Because you asked me, do you remember the cover of the book? And you asked that other person, do you remember the cover of the book? And it's oftentimes, no, not really. And then I go away and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, there was this on it and it was drawn this way and it was kind of ugly, but it was, and there was those colors get into you and you start remembering things about it. I can remember sitting on that floor and it would have been painful on my ass to sit on that wooden floor, cold floor, and yet I wasn't bothered by it. And that I was sat right by Mr. Everett, who, and being a side meant that at any point in time, if you did anything, you could get the back of his hand, because it was those days, you could get the back of his hand, he would just flick you across the top of the head. But I didn't mind being there. It was so wonderful, right? So I love the way you sort of pulled in everything else and you elicited that from me and certainly from the other people. But there's another piece in here that I love about this. And I think we've forgotten it. We as humans have forgotten it. You're asking me a question. When you're asking me this question about the book that was read to me, the subtext is this. You're asking me to remember the act of love. It's an act of love when somebody reads to you. When you're being read a story, it's an act of pure love. It's all about you. I'm giving this to you. I'm performing this story for you. It's all for you. It's an act of pure love. And what you're actually asking me, without saying that, what you're actually asking the person you're working with is, describe to me this act of pure love that was given to you. And most of us have some kind of screwed up childhood, something missing. In the words of the man you mentioned, John Bradshaw, 97% of us grew up in dysfunctional families and the other 3% are fucking liars. And that's Bradshaw's words, who I loved and spent time with him. But, this act of pure love, and sometimes amidst of a very dysfunctional childhood, somebody gave this act of love, and you're actually asking us that without saying that. So there's no defense mechanism. There's no, we're not getting too vulnerable here. Oh, this is too therapy. You're just asking, well, what's that story? And I love that. I mean, it's like, boom, that is a bullet. That's right to the heart. It's fantastic because it explodes us open in a level of vulnerability that doesn't mean we have to be on guard.
Yes.
And it's like, it's beautifully done, Leah. Like when I had that conversation with you, I went away and thought about, that's what it is. It's the first act of love. Like I'm very keen on reading to my granddaughters. But I particularly, since I met you, I'm very much, I mean, I've always been very animated in this, but I feel like, I wonder what's sticking. And I wonder what's not. I wonder what's just not sticking. That's okay. But it's like, I wonder what it's revealing to this person. It was two, that's pretty cool.
That's beautiful. I mean, I just, beautiful. I feel weepy just listening to you.
Well, you are the expert, not me. It's so talk to us about what you see. You said that, these people are going and they're seeing that they're seeing their own people differently. When you're in a room with those people, you said that you see that come alive. One of the things that you and I talked about in a previous conversation was, and you've just touched on it here, is this idea of simplicity. And we talked about the courage to make things simple. Tell us why that is so important for us, and how do we get more of that courage to keep it simple?
Well, I think it's important from my perspective because it's light, it's fun-hearted, it's who we are. I tossed this in reluctantly, but I did stand-up comedy in the 80s for a couple of years. There was hardly any women doing it. I was doing it. I was not good, but people, it was the kindness of strangers that kept me going back up there. But I realized, as complex as comedy can be and everything else, it's just everybody just wants things to be simple, just to be simple. Just let me laugh. Let me remember who I am. Just let things be simple. Let things be joyous, you know. I'm not walking around all the time going, I love life. I'm not that. No. I am, I just have a good time being small, and I happen to be 5'2", so that helps. But it just makes me so happy when I see people small, because it's where the giant comes out.
Oh, you know? That's interesting. Small is where the giant
comes out. It really is. You know, I think when you mentioned your friend Mark Levy before, brilliant guy who helped me so much. I had told him this story once, that Michael Bloomberg, when he was running for president, he gave a speech about why he should be president, and he mentioned his first kid's book that he remembered. And when he talked about, obviously he was not a client of mine, but obviously he he got it. He talked about this book called Johnny Tremaine and how it guided him, and how he, and it was as if it was so clear to him and so pure to him and so true to him that he was writing out, like notes for, the board of directors or something. It was, I think it's really hard to be. It takes courage to be simple. It's taken me, me. We've talked for a while. It's taken me years of figuring out who I can even begin to talk to this about. I've always had people, leaders of companies, billionaires, different people who weren't waiting to see whether or not the shoe was going to fall in the world. They were just like, you have another opportunity? Let me try it, because I'll try anything. I've always had those people, some of those people. But I think basically just beginning to challenge the fact that we just don't know that much. And we know plenty of it, is really hard. It takes tremendous courage to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to look at it. And a lot of people just go, I can't do it. It's great, don't do it.
But you're feeding an appetite that we don't even know we have.
Yeah.
And the appetite is the hunger for simplicity.
Yeah.
In an ever increasingly complex world.
Yeah.
We hunger for simplicity. Everything seems so frigging complex. And I talk about this in my work when I talk about tribalism. Tribalism, people say, how can you be on board with that or this or that? Whatever it is the person's on board with. You're so smart, and I go, and I'll tell them, I say, because it's simple. It's simple. It's black and white, right and wrong. And there's complexity to it that I want to bring forward and is important to bring forward. But I understand that people are getting on board with that bullshit because they crave the simplicity. They just want to go home and say, this is what I believe in. Right. And I don't want to think about the nuances because they're thrown at me every day. And, and so they believe bloody Fox News, or they believe MSNBC, or they believe whatever the voice is that is thrown at them, because they crave that simplicity and they crave mattering. So here's where we get to. Human beings need to know they're important. Somebody sits down and reads to you, it's an act of love. It's an act of significance. It's an act of validating you as a human being in that moment. Okay, so there's that. And there's this simplicity of a child's story that's telling me right from wrong. You are accessing those parts of the neurological system that have not been activated in so long. So we play them out in tribalism because we want it to be simple. And we don't feel significant, so we scream at the top of our voice, whether that's through the keyboard or in a real life. And you're giving people this sense of their own significance in the world, that somebody saw them as significant to read them. Even though Mr. Everett was not reading to me, he was reading to the class, that story was for me. I don't know if the rest of the class remembers it, but I know that I do. It was an act of significance for me, an act of love for me, and it gave me a sense of what mattered. It gave me a sense of what mattered. And I know that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because I do know these things, is a Christian story. The lion is Christ and all the rest of it. And so the resurrection, I understand that because I understand story and I understand Jungian storytelling. It's beautifully told. Am I a Christian? No. Am I going to become one? No. But those messages are still so solid and allow me to see the complexities of human beings in a very compassionate way. I don't see the queen as evil. I see the queen as driven by something. And so it's so beautiful the way you've done this. And I feel like I'm blowing smoke here, but it's really important for people to grasp that we crave simplicity and we also crave significance. We crave somebody honoring us by sitting and reading a story. And the simplicity of knowing what's true in a world that's telling us this is right, this is right. Well, hold on a minute. Those are conflicting. Where's the guidelines? And when I sat with you, what I got was that you bring people back to their truth, not the truth. Like to be at peace with their truth, not to justify their truth. It's just like, this is what I've always known. And I don't know why I've known it, but I've known it since I was 4 or 5 or 6. And that's why you said you're sitting in the room with these beautiful little children who used to be monstrous CEOs, who used to be, arrogant assholes, who are suddenly these beautiful children who are alive. Like I used to say, I see kids everywhere, right?
Yeah.
From the movie, like I see dead people everywhere. I see kids everywhere, right? Yeah. Sometimes they're pain in the ass kids, but if you look past that, there's some pretty amazing kids in there.
Think when you're saying that, it reminds me that, having been with like 100,000 children all over America, and you were talking about, when I think about CEOs, I can see when a child in a big vast sea of faces, you can look and you can tell this kid's already gone and he's 6, and it kind of, and by the time they're adults, and obviously I don't know what the nature of their life is, but you said something that reminded me of something that somebody really smart said, and I can't think of who they were, so I'm going to take a guess. It was Oprah. Sure. But I'm just going to kind of, you can't lose with Oprah, I'm thinking. And because she was talking about one of Gary Zucker's books, but she is saying it's about where your personality meets your soul. That's your purpose. She was talking about that. Personality meets your purpose. And I think when I work with people with kids' books, it's not only they remember the book, they remember who they are in that story. When I think about the story that most affected me, it was a book that to this day, if I actually stop and I get honest with myself, I know I am this character, Gerald McGrew, from the book, If I Ran the Zoo by Dr. Seuss. I mean, right. I can remember relating to the kid. The kid in the story was mildly depressed, as I'm sure I was. Kind of a little kid, mildly depressed, who really wanted to change up the whole world, but could only get to the zoo and we have this incredible imagination, but was punished afterwards or ashamed for their imagination. And imagination, I have realized or discovered, is the one word still that people are terrified of using in business. I never hear it. Unless you're going to Disney and you're working for Imagineering, there's no conversation about imagination. None. Being able to step into creativity and talk conversations about, innovation. This in and of itself is a huge leap. It was not that many years ago before, and I know this from a trajectory of doing what I'm doing for a long time. I could not say the word creative unless it was creative and strategic. You couldn't say the word innovation because people weren't thinking like that. Now everybody's going, it's up for grabs. I don't know anything. I never have. maybe imagination is, Einstein said, imagination is more valuable than knowledge.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's true.
So do you feel like it's still, like imagination is still sort of a bit of a swear word in business, or do you feel?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But, I don't know.
Have we, so therefore, have we changed it have we whitewashed it into the word innovation?
Yeah, which is great.
Innovation is not, for me, it's a different thing altogether.
Well, innovation is, to me, and I don't know if I may have this wrong, is you can't innovate until you have a creative idea. It's the act of acting on the creative idea. Is that it?
Yeah. So like the innovation is a result of the creativity, which is the seed, and the creativity is a result of the permission.
Yeah.
Right. The self permission, because I often hear, and I've talked about this with many CEOs and leaders that I work with, and I say, you keep talking about you keep talking about having people think outside the box, but you keep hiring inside the box. So you put out a request for somebody to apply, and you say, do this and be that, and you've got an MBA in this, and you blah blah blah, and you're giving them the confines of the box. And then when they show up for the interview, you say, how do you do with thinking outside the box? Well, you just had me show up in the box.
Yeah.
You gave me the bloody prison, and now you're asking me to describe what it's like outside of the prison. Well,
yeah,
it's, and again, that's why I'm saying I find it interesting that you've gone after this idea that imagination is so bad. But
imagination is what children do.
Yeah, but when you think about it, and I have had this discussion in my workshops with people, and I say, I want you to look around this room and name anything at all that isn't a result of imagination. And they go, right. What do you mean? They go, well, that plant's that's natural. And I go, yep, it is natural. In the tropics, it doesn't exist in North America. It was brought here by somebody's imagination who thought, oh, that would look nice in a pot. Oh, well, your pen, the clothes you're wearing. And we boil it all down, and I go, even you are a result of somebody's imagination.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had kids? Or, oh my God, it's a negative imagination, right? But it's an imagination. There's some picturing of something, some creative spark that is awakened. And so it's like what I'm hearing, Leah, is that you're giving permission to access that part, as long with the simplicity and the significance. So it's the imagination, it's the simplicity and the significance.
Yeah.
And in that first story, someone read to me significance, an act of love. The simplicity of, I know what's right and what's not right. I know what aligns with me. And my imagination is filling in all the colors and all the sounds and all the experiences. Well, what if we did that with brands? Well, that's exactly what you do. That's exactly what Leah does with brands, is she makes it simple in an act of love, of absolute significance, and then shows you the way to unlock that palette of colors with which to paint your brand as if you were 6 years old. I just love that. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Really do. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
We're already coming to the end of part 2 of the show here. And I want to know, if you are sitting there, if a person is sitting there listening to this and they could sort of go and do something in the next 5 minutes, next 10 minutes, or maybe tomorrow, but certainly the sooner the better. And you were giving them guidance in how to move forward with this in some way, shape, or form that would be honoring of what we've talked about. What would you guide them to do? That's
a beautiful question. I would suggest you think of the first kids book that comes to mind. It may not be the first one that was you remember, but just the first kids book. And then you get a copy of that book and you read it out loud. When I work with people, I have them read their books to me. I hear different things when people talk. I know the rhythms and beats of words from writing children's books and rhyme and stuff. But then you read it out loud. You have to read it out loud to somebody. I don't care if it's your dog, but you read it out loud. And you'll probably, for many people, you're going to be picking up a book you haven't seen in decades. And you are going to be remembering who you are. And you're going to be, as people have said to me very often, you just blew me away. I'm not doing anything. You go and open up the book, and you will blow you away.
Mm-hmm.
And I will know how to guide you so you don't go, as my favorite brand guru, George Carlin, often said, think off center, not outside the box, not this, just off center, just a little bit off center, so that you go outside the box, it's really hard to get back in. So that's what I would suggest.
That's beautiful.
Give yourself the gift of just doing that. You can get a copy of almost anything on Amazon, a used copy or whatever, and have the courage to get that book in your house. You may already have it on your thing. And read it. If you have a child around, Nirvana, read it to the child.
Yeah. I after we spoke, I got The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I read it out loud, and it was like so many things I'd forgotten. And I saw the movie about it, and and I loved the movie, and it was more for kids, but I was like completely intrigued with it and loved it. But the reading it out loud, that particularly that evil side was very big, and as I read it out loud, it was like, oh my God. And that spoke to the childhood. It spoke to what I was living through in this ominous, dark place of my childhood. And It brought back sadness and tears and all the rest of it. But there was this wonderful, the little girl, whose name's just slipped my mind for a second, the little girl of the three kids, as she's the youngest, and how she's not believed. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. This feeling of not being believed, of being on the other side.
You identify. I think what happens with people is not only is a lot of people, you identify with the character and you remember that you felt like that character when you first read that book, and you still feel like that character today. Yeah. And if you can let yourself get simple enough to get there, you can make all sorts of changes. It's never too late to be a child. You can make all sorts of changes in your direction and everything else. It's just,
Yeah. As Carrie Fisher said, you're never too old to have a wonderful childhood.
Yeah, she was right.
Yeah.
Well,
right. Leah, we are already at the end of part 2. It has been wonderful and delicious.
Wonderful.
I hope that you will stay with us to the end. But before we go, I want to make sure that everybody knows about how they can find you. You are on Twitter. You can find her on Twitter. You can find her on LinkedIn. But you also have your own main website.
I'm best on my website. I must confess, I am not massively involved in Twitter or those things, but I always respond to people. I like to introduce people individually as opposed to blast them out in front of a bunch of people who aren't going to read. So I can be found at my website. That's the best place. And then I'll get back with you and we'll set up a call or whatever we want to do.
And as I said, we'll make sure all those are posted. Leah's website is Leah, Komaiko, leahkomaiko.com. Right. Again, we'll make sure it's in the show notes. And Leah, stay with us to the end. But for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. There's meaning in your story. There's a meaning in the story you first read or was read to you. Whether you're a business leader or a political leader, if you're committed to positively shaping and changing the landscape, you got to tap into what drives human beings. And you can tap into that through the anatomy of meaning and the emotional source code. I'm Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. about the simplicity that is hidden within you. If you have the courage to find it, you might find the whole thing that sets your soul on fire again, because you'll remember a moment of being completely loved, of being completely significant, and you'll be able to get back to the simplicity that you've craved. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.